The first is just, what can we do for families in general in recovery? And that could be, I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom here, and that's just this little blurb here. That could be things like family recovery picnics. That could be maybe additional support groups. If there's something that maybe Al-Anon or other family support groups in town are not quite, hitting, or they're not catching everybody, maybe there's a niche there that we can fill. Continuing education and awareness to help reduce stigma. Maybe some panels with people, family members in recovery or who have loved ones in recovery, helping out with childcare, YouTube videos, that kind of thing. So that's kind of one direction. When we're getting into our breakouts later, maybe think about, just this sort of catch-all bucket of what can we do to help support family members of people in recovery. As well, the ROSC is always looking at the recoveries themselves, but also, what can we do to kind of help rebuild the family relationships and, get the families doing stuff together and understanding the illness. And then the second thing is up here, and that's kind of, for lack of a better term, just calling like a family program. And what I mean by that is something that's more traditional that a lot of treatment centers have. When I went to treatment at Advocate Broman through their Illinois Institute for Addiction Recovery, they had a family program that was on Saturdays, and it was like an 8-hour thing where family members come in and you do all sorts of different exercises, learning videos, just frank conversations about how the disease has affected, the family members. It's just kind of like it touches a lot of different areas. When I was at Gateway, they had something like that. Same with Rosecrans. When I had my long-term treatment down in Florida, they had a 1-week family program. It was like really, really dove in. And, I personally, I won't get into my whole story, but it did a ton for our family. We still, during holidays, we'll sit down and talk about some of those experiences, and how just them learning about addiction as, not just a moral failing or something that they did to cause me to be an addict, was extremely helpful. Also helped to learn about, the concepts like codependency and learning, to accept what the family member can control and focus on that versus trying to fix, manage, and control everything going on, around them, particularly the addict or alcoholic in their life. And so what I'm getting at is Chestnut used to have something like that was offered twice a month. And when I say used to, I'm going back now probably at least 3 years ago. And there is no longer a family program. There's a couple of different reasons, but it basically came down to staff turnover. And so we're thinking that that's something the ROSC could help fill. That's an important gap our community does not have. Our family members and our people in treatment or early in recovery here in McLean County don't have access to a family program here in town. So where you're looking at this bullet list where it says possible topics covered, just something like a video along the lines of Pleasure Unwoven. I'm going to play a couple clips from that in a moment for those of you who aren't familiar with it, which does a good job of explaining the disease of addiction and how the brain is affected in good layperson terms. One thing that, these are just ideas. Again, I'm not saying we have to do any of this. This is just a quick list that we came up with, and part of what we want to do later in the breakouts is, kind of modify this or tighten it up or add to it, or say, hey, this looks good. Let's try that, maybe not this thing. So I'm just kind of running through the list, this preliminary list real quick. But another thing that, and this was with Hanley Center where I mentioned the 1-week program. I don't know that we'd be able to do this or not, but something, just put it against the wall, seeing what sticks. They actually had people in treatment, but they weren't the family members of, so like you had the family members at the program, and then you had other people in treatment come in who weren't actually the loved ones of those family members, if that makes sense. So they were like peers of their loved ones who were in treatment, but they were strangers to the actually family members. I know this is probably getting confusing, but what it did was they were brought in on the first 2 days, and then the loved ones would be brought in Wednesday and Thursday. And what it allowed for was the family members who were there for their loved ones who are in treatment to say things, get things off their mind, get things out in the open, ask questions that maybe they would have been reluctant to do if it was just they were immediately in an environment right there with their loved ones. Is that making sense? Hopefully it does, and we can talk it through if it doesn't. And then what happened is the family members came in, and the ones who are in active addiction or in treatment for active addiction would come in later, and then the family members were a little bit more sort of up to speed and in a sort of mental place where they were ready to kind of sort of get down to causes and conditions. And so that was kind of a cool approach. Other things, just talking about the impact that the disease had on the family, some discussions or some worksheets that I remember we would fill out. And it just, sometimes can cause some, moments of clarity or eye-opening moments about, really the addict or alcoholic or whomever realizing that, they really aren't just harming themselves, and they can sort of see from the loved ones directly or hear directly from the loved ones, how their illness has affected the family. Some exercises or, things around boundaries and enabling. I think most of us kind of know sort of what we're talking about there. Also, when I was down in Florida, they had this hula hoop exercise, which was basically everybody would get up and have their own hula hoop. And it was really a metaphor for boundaries. So the idea was we all have hula hoops around our waist, all the time. And so do other people. And, inside our hula hoop is what we can control: our thoughts, our actions, our opinions, our values. And outside of the hula hoop is what we can't control, what other people think or what they think about us, what they plan to do, what they don't plan to do, what the weather's like, what traffic's going to be like, what internet connection is going to be like, whatever. But the discussion was around the family in particular. When the family is ill from the disease of addiction, there's so much time spent worrying about things outside the hula hoop, right? Is their loved one going to ask for money and then go get high with it? Are they going to relapse yet again and break our heart? Are they going to finally go try and get that job they keep talking about? Are they going to finally go talk to that counselor that we gave them the phone number for, 6 months ago? And it's just kind of about, breaking boundaries and being authentic to ourselves when we stay in our hoop and stay out of others and respect them. The loved one is either going to recover or they're not. But, when it comes to like codependency, we'll drive as a family member there's others that could probably attest to this better than me, but you drive yourself even more crazy trying to, get outside the hula hoop, so to speak, and fix other people's, and that's just part of the nature, especially if we're talking about, parents or caregivers, but it ended up being a pretty cool exercise. And I think Smart Recovery does something similar to this. I was kind of looking it up before today's meeting. So that's sort of what the idea there is with the hula hoop thing. Maybe some time spent, and again, this is typically done over an 8 hour with some breaks put in, full day. So if it seems like a lot, it is, but these are kind of this is my best understanding through experience of kind of like best practices for family day stuff. And I'm sure I'm missing some stuff. But just assertive, open and honest communication, identifying, breaking down barriers to communication. As we know, there's a lot of isolation and sort of shutting down that happens when there's an addict in the home, or we're close with one, or we're the person with the substance use disorder ourselves, and we want to relate to family members, but we just can't bring ourselves to do it. I think might be a good idea to have just some basic education about, the steps and, sort of establish recovery programs and the role spirituality plays in recovery. Here we could potentially bring in some speakers from Al-Anon, to talk about how they've recovered from the family perspective, or, people from 12-step or recovery programs in the area, help them understand where to find meetings, that kind of thing. And then just some other ideas, just general relapse prevention and day-to-day recovery management for families, red flags to look out for that might mean their loved one is kind of going down, starting that process of relapse again. Ways to help in a healthy manner, detach with love, again, sort of getting back to the idea of codependency, not trying to run somebody's life and make yourself deeply affected by it, but kind of knowing when enough is enough, and there's only so much help you can give, and at some point, the person who's in active addiction, kind of needs to want it for themselves and take those necessary actions. Okay, so that's that. I know I'm throwing a lot at you here. What I wanted to do before we kind of just open it up and then go into breakouts is play just a couple clips from that Pleasure Unwoven video. And it'll be about 3 clips that are all like 2-3 minutes each. And before I do that, if anybody has any questions or wants to add something while I'm kind of getting all that ready, by all means, please jump in.
Everyone. I would just like to add that I know it's really difficult for even myself when I was, first entering recovery in the community, and my family to understand what I was going through and vice versa. We had to like almost get to know each other, but they were still in the same place, psychologically expecting the same behaviors and actions and thought processes from me. So we get to know each other, and there were times where that was hard.
Very true. Thank you, Angi. Yeah, it's weird. You can be in treatment with, strangers basically, or go to meetings with people you don't know that well, or a counselor who you just met the day you checked in, and sort of bare your heart out, and tell them all sorts of things that you done or said that you never wanted anyone to know. But then when it comes to the people you love the most, for me anyway, it's like, even when sober early on, I just go, these are the people, this is my wife, my parents, the people I profess to love the most. And when it comes to that open communication, it's like I'm more comfortable sometimes talking to a virtual stranger than, my own wife about some of the stuff. It could be hard, it is a relearning thing. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. I got to do the thing to make sure you can hear it too. Pretty sure I know how to do that. Share sound. Okay. So this clip is addiction really a disease? And this is, try and picture yourself as somebody who knows probably very nothing about addiction or alcoholism, other than sort of the storm that they see on a day-to-day basis with their loved one. And, this is kind of something that this would be one of their sort of frontline exposures to the idea of some of these ideas about addiction as a disease, and how the brain is affected, and how it might explain some of the things that they're seeing.
Drugs exist throughout nature, and their use to produce intoxication occurs in animals far older than man. It seems that as long as blood has flowed through human veins, drugs have flowed with it. And wherever you find the phenomenon of intoxication, so too will you find the problem of addiction. Of all the questions we can ask about addiction, there is one question that stands out. All the other questions about addiction begin with this one, and everything hinges on the answer. The most important question about addiction is simply this: is it really a disease? When I first came to treatment for my own problem with addiction, my counselors told me that addiction was a disease. As a physician, I was skeptical. Addiction's not a disease, it's a choice. Diabetes is a disease. The diabetic didn't choose to get it, but the drug addict did have the choice to start using drugs. Cancer is a disease. It befalls an unfortunate person through no fault of their own. But addicts, they do this to themselves. That made sense to me. But the more I expressed my sympathy for the argument against calling addiction a disease, the more my counselors told me that I was in denial and that I needed to surrender. Well, they were right, I did. But as a doctor, I believe that patients have the right to ask questions. And as a patient, I wasn't satisfied with the answers I was getting. A lot of people told me that addiction was a disease, but very few of them could defend that position. And I had to know. So I decided to find out for myself. And that set me on a personal journey that has taken the last 10 years of my life. Along the way, I've come to realize that this question is far more complex than it looks. And finding the answer takes more than medicine and science. Our path travels through philosophy, law, politics, even history. I began my search just trying to make sense of my own addictive behavior. I quickly discovered that I had stumbled across one of the greatest intellectual puzzles of our time.
Next one.
There are many arguments against calling addiction a disease, but the best argument I've ever heard is one I call the choice argument. The choice argument says that addiction can't be a disease because drug taking is a behavior and all behaviors are choices. The choice argument goes on to say that even though an addict might tell you he can't stop drinking or using drugs, that he's powerless over drugs and alcohol, really he can stop anytime. That's right, addicts can quit anytime they want. You just have to help them make the right choice. To show how easy it is to get an addict to stop drinking or using drugs, the choice argument suggests this simple experiment. I take a bottle of alcohol, pour out a glass, and put it in front of the alcoholic. And I offer it up to him. Go ahead, Mr. Alcoholic, take a drink. No, really, it's on the house. But when the alcoholic reaches for the glass, I add a small twist. Oh, but Mr. Alcoholic, if you do choose to take that drink, then I'm going to blow your brains out. Most alcoholics will choose not to drink. And that's the choice argument's point. With a strong enough threat, I can get the addict to stop their behavior in a way I just can't for real patients with real diseases. Diabetes, for instance. You can't put a gun to the head of the diabetic and say, okay, better bring that blood sugar down to 100 or I'll blow your brains out. It's not going to work. The choice argument draws a distinction between behaviors and symptoms. In the case of symptoms, those are part of a disease process. Free will plays no part. We don't hold patients responsible for their symptoms because they can't choose not to have them, and that's why punishing and coercing real patients is inappropriate. But drug taking is a behavior. All behaviors are choices. Free will does exist. The addict is responsible for their behaviors because they can quit if they choose to. You just have to motivate them to make the right choice. That's the choice argument. That's the best argument I've ever heard against calling addiction a disease. And I think it's a darn good argument. But it has problems. And in the end, I think the choice argument is wrong, because it fails to take into account some exciting new research about the brain. Research that shows that our capacity for choice is far more complicated and fragile than we ever imagined. Is addiction a disease or a choice? The short answer is, addiction is a disease of choice. It's a disorder of the very parts of the brain we need to make proper decisions.
One more.
The theory that describes what goes wrong in the frontal cortex during addiction was developed by Dr. Peter Kalavas at the Medical University of South Carolina and Dr. Nora Volkoff, the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse. They recognize that dopamine is important in the early stages of addiction. But the final common pathway in addiction is the glutamate neurons projecting back down from the frontal cortex. Kalavas and Volkoff's research is based on an important new tool that has only recently become available to neuroscience, the technology of brain scans. Brain scans are essentially photographs of the brain in action. Now, what these brain scans say exactly is still controversial, but Kalavas and Volkoff have found abnormal activity in the brain scans of addicts in two important areas of the cortex, the orbitofrontal cortex and the anterior cingulate cortex. These areas are critical for emotional attachment and decision-making. Kalavas and Volkoff believe that the abnormal activity here is the basis of the overwhelming importance the brain gives to drugs and the uncontrollable urge it feels to seek them. In addiction, the normal top-down control of the cortex over the midbrain simply fails. The addict's prior commitment to quit, their memory of what happened the last time they drank or used drugs, the love they feel for their family, the knowledge of the punishment they know awaits them if they relapse, when the cortex fails, these things are invisible to the addict. Kalavas and Volkoff call this brain state hypofrontality. What was once a healthy, functional, decision-making frontal cortex is reduced to a shadow of its former self. Overactivity in some areas of the brain, and other areas, desolation. This is what lies behind the denial, the personality changes, the breathtakingly impaired decision-making in combination with the tragic loss of insight that characterize end-stage addiction. Addiction begins as a disorder of genes and pleasure, but it ends as a disorder of choice. Hypofrontality gives the addicted brain a powerful tool to protect the connection of the drug to survival, and that tool is called craving. Craving is a difficult concept. We all use the word craving. When people say they crave chocolate, what they mean is they really want chocolate a lot. It's important to understand that's not what the addict means when they say they crave. Craving is an intense, emotional, obsessional experience. The addict wants to think about other things. Their brain is constantly bringing them back to the drug. They are up in the middle of the night. They can't sleep. Their pulse is at 120. They're thinking over and over again, just one more time. That's craving. And make no mistake, that is genuine suffering. And I think it's the presence of craving that defeats that choice argument. You remember the choice argument. Addiction's not a disease because the addict can quit anytime he wants. Go ahead, put alcohol in front of the alcoholic, and when he reaches for it, you point a gun at his head, and he will choose not to drink. And that's true. With a gun to his head, the addict can, in that moment, choose not to drink. But even though the addict isn't drinking or using, he's still craving. He doesn't have the choice not to crave. Once that connection of the drug to survival has been carved into the brain, you don't actually have to have drug use anymore for the disease process of addiction to be active. The choice argument fails because it measures addiction by the addict's behavior. In doing so, it misses the most important feature of addiction to the addict, the craving. The other thing the choice argument doesn't quite get is that if you put alcohol in front of an alcoholic and a gun to his head, he doesn't think, oh, I better not drink or I'll get shot in the head. No, what he thinks sounds more like this. I wonder if he'll really shoot me. I wonder if he's even got bullets in that gun. Maybe his finger will slip off the trigger. I wonder if I can get that alcohol into my brain before the bullet comes crashing through my skull. That's craving, and that experience is as miserable as it is involuntary.
Okay. The stress and addiction one's also good, but I think for the sake of time, we'll just stop there. Mind you, these are just several clips out of an entire hour-plus movie. So there's a lot in between that's explained and gone into greater detail, but just kind of wanted to pick a few things. I like that last one in particular because it talks about that physical craving and how that really is what's the engine behind the addict or alcoholic sort of going to any lengths to get that next fix. That's where they'll break laws or do things against their values or things that they were raised not to do because their brain is hijacked into needing that to survive. It talks about it more in the video, but the stuff isn't happening in the frontal cortex part of the brain where we have problem solving and decision making and values. It's happening in the part of our brain where it's all about survival, and we'll take, we'll choose or we'll be compelled to have that next drink or drug over food, water, shelter, procreation, anything. So let me stop sharing here. So with that, we're gonna go into breakouts. I'm gonna turn it over to her in just a sec. What we're looking for is just freestyle and discussions about, from your perspective, what do you think the families, in our community need from a recovery standpoint? If you want to kind of hone in on this particular, one-day family education thing, with the bullets in red that I went through, that's great. If you want to go in a different direction and look more at like family events or services and other services in the community or childcare or transportation, that kind of stuff, that's great too. There's really no rules or strict mandates about, what we want to talk about. It's just as long as it somehow touches the families, that's the main thing.
Yeah, I'm just about ready. I'm gonna put everyone into their rooms.
Any questions before she sends us to our breakouts?
Can you kind of give me an idea of any other, I think we've talked about like Becky Ropp had some kind of something for students, and I just wonder what other services similar that we want to be aware of.
Sure. Yeah, so there is Al-Anon in the community, but then what you're speaking of is Alateen, and Becky did have Thursday nights at 7 before COVID. There was an Alateen meeting at the Intergroup downtown, which is the Fox and Hounds building. Anyway, it has not started back up, and it was kind of waning a little bit even before COVID, but she's asked me if Chestnut would allow them to meet, in that Glen Covert building or one of their facilities. I've had several people, probably 4 or 5 different groups, ask if they could meet at Chestnut, in recent months, and that's still not being allowed yet. But to answer your question, there is not a formal support group for teens, whether it be.
What about Celebrate Recovery? Sorry about that. I'm interrupting.
No, you're good. Celebrate Recovery does have, I can't speak to, maybe I should just see if somebody else can speak to it better than me. I know they have like family-friendly events and that kind of thing, but I don't believe they have actual like recovery for use. And if I'm misspeaking, I deeply apologize. That's something we can follow up with Scott Kemp.
Yeah, and actually, that's a great segue, Dan. Before we go into the groups, I can take that as an action item to follow up with Scott in regards to Celebrate Recovery. And I think Toy just unmuted right when I started speaking, so I'll give the floor to Toy, please.
Yeah, I was going to say they do have something for teens. So I will follow with Scott. They just started something maybe a year ago.
Okay.
So yeah, follow. I don't know the in-depth in it, but follow with Scotty. That'd be a good opportunity for him
Okay.
to share about that. Yeah.
Not,
And
not that we
again,
don't-
I just wanted to add regarding place, to meet. Dreams are possible out in the west side of Bloomington on Olive Street. We only use the building so far on Tuesdays and Thursdays for classes.
Oh.
And so really, we have told other organizations that if they need a place to meet, we are open. Mary and I are open for the use of the building.
okay. Thanks.
So-
Kit.
So
Thank
Faye,
you.
would they reach out to you directly? I don't want to,
Yes.
I won't advertise your name in Pathogram per se, but maybe out of this meeting, I'm jotting down some action items that you and I can have a discussion offline, well, or Dan can, to figure out, hey, if we have
How?
space in brick and mortar, maybe we can make some more meetings happen. Awesome. I'm gonna
Yes.
go ahead and open the rooms now. Thank you for that, Faye.
You're welcome.
Thank you for writing that in the chat.
I was just gonna throw into CR would be very Christian centric too. So there could still be a need for youth recovery services that are maybe more just agnostic.
Hi, good afternoon.
Good to see Jessica all the way from Chicago.
No, I never moved. I just
Oh,
was
never moved?
commuting for work.
Oh, really?
And so I don't commute for work anymore. I work at Harlan for the last year, a little
Oh,
over a
awesome.
year.
Okay. That's
So
good
Jess,
to
I
know.
didn't know that even a year ago you were living in Chicago and in this area.
No, I wasn't. I didn't move, but I was at a time I was working at a different community college in Champaign. So I just used to commute. So when that happened, I stopped being so involved in things locally because I wanted to kind of get more rooted in
Ah,
things in Champaign so I could be aware of those things. So that's why you've not seen me filling. But I've been in town.
That's it. I remember Champagne, but I was like, wait, Chicago, I remember that one. Awesome. And it sounds like Bailey, Jessica, and I know each other. Anna, I don't want you to feel left out of the conversation. Hi, my name's Angie.
And I'm Jessica. I work for Heartland Community College.
And I'm Faye.
So,
Nice to meet you all.
Anna, what brings you to the ROSC Council meeting?
Well, my friend Bruce Lang told me about it. I'm a recovering addict. I'm 25 years clean.
Oh, wow.
I'm a member of Narcotics Anonymous.
Uh-huh.
So I have a personal interest in the subject and just wanted to check the project out, see if there was anything I could contribute.
Oh, sure. Wonderful.
I'm a resource.
Well, Anna, this is an incredible
Yeah.
project for you to come and give your input, because I firmly believe, I myself am in recovery as well, that we need to ask individuals themselves, you know, not only their own recovery process, but also what worked for them. And so in regards to, you know, even in the beginning, throughout, or even now, how has your family played a role? And if it's too much, if it's too triggering, you can tell me that this is something that you don't feel comfortable discussing.
Well, I joined Alcoholics Anonymous about 40 years ago. I hadn't quite had my last drink, but I was on the road to recovery. And I told my mom and my sister about it. My father had already passed away, and they really wouldn't touch it. They didn't really warm to the subject. They didn't ask any questions. They didn't make any comments. They just backed off. So they really didn't play a role in my recovery. I did it on my own.
And it really does take internal motivation to not only seek help, but to stay, you know, whatever your recovery path is, abstinence, the whole 9 yards.
Was there someone, if not your family, nuclear family, who kept you on track?
No, I mean, I threw myself into the fellowship of the 12-step groups, and those were my primary relationships. That was my peer group. I got a sponsor. I worked with sponsors most of the time over the ensuing years. A sponsor is a kind of a mentor to guide you through the 12 steps, a resource. And that and the meetings, and it was a peer group for me. And that peer support is what really made it possible. Of course, spirituality is important. I did my best to cultivate a relationship with a higher power also. But there was no one outside of recovery that really made it possible for me to recover. It was just within the fellowship. Now, in recent years, I'm pretty tight with Bruce, and we talk about my recovery, and he does provide support. But for many years, it was just the people I found in the meetings.
So Anna, you bring up a very valid experience and point of how do we define family? So it doesn't necessarily have to be like blood relatives or nuclear or people you grow up with. It could be what you found, it sounds like, family fellowship.
Yeah, Bruce is like chosen family.
So now in your recovery journey, is there anything even family related or in general that you find in this? Are you located in the community locally?
No, I'm in Chicago.
Okay.
Oh,
I come down to Bloomington 3 or 4 times a year.
Oh, okay.
yeah. You are so dedicated, to your own recovery to make, that effort,
Mhm.
Yeah. I agree with Angie that individuals, like you, is really very important in the work that we're trying, to do to help others who are in recovery. So, so they know that it's really hard. I have a different kind of addiction. I did not put alcohol in my system, neither drugs, but I was addicted to a relationship, to someone that we were not together all the time physically, but emotionally, I was so attached to him for nearly 40 years. Until, I got hold of the book, How to Stop Your Addiction to a Person, by accident. Because just like, alcohol, I have had relapse, with this guy. He was a nice man, spiritual, and all of those, but it was not really a good combination between him and I, and I also agree that spirituality really played a very important role in my recovery. And after I had read the book, I had to recognize that mine is not alcohol, but I have the same symptoms and the same behavior. And after I had, accepted it, then, my recovery, started.
So what is your life like now?
I am much better now. I did not get married because, I got married late in life because my focus was on, unconsciously, my focus is on this guy, until I got him out of my system, which in the process also involved physical, medical, would say illness. But in my mind, I'm thinking, it is not just that, but more of the toxin that is really being manifested in my body. In the end, after I was sober for maybe a couple of years, I fell in love again and I met my husband, and I'm happily married now. So So I hear you, and I hear also Angie. Angie, by the way, I watched your video with the other Angie, and I think that's another important resource, in terms of, people who are in, want to recover or are in recovery. We are not different from each other. It may be food, it may be alcohol, it may be drugs, it may be a person, but the patterns are all, the same.
That's such a great point, Fairly. And I wish, I think we might have to do an all-day workshop on going through the layers of whatever I like to say the maladaptive behavior that consumes your life, where it impedes the quality and the peace of your life. So with that, it's already 4:22. We need to do this for a whole day. Anna, it was great to meet you, but I think I need to bring us all back to the main group. So thank you for this session, and I look forward to picking it up further. Hi, welcome back, everyone. So I think we're all starting to filter slowly back in. So I think this is probably the second meeting we've used breakout sessions in, and we're learning the whole IT protocols and the platforms. So I always think that I have a little bit of time, but once I hit, go into the breakout rooms, we literally go. So I'll give a better heads up of like, okay, we're gonna spend 5-10 minutes in the breakout rooms, not to break anyone's thoughts or conversations. So as my daughter says, you work with humans, Mom, not technology.
That was quick.
Yeah,
Through talking.
fortunately, an hour goes quick. We may have to continue this into a future meeting. Again, this family stuff is something we're looking at as kind of like a 1-year plan. We're not expecting to have this off the ground by September or something. So we just wanted to kind of lay some groundwork here. Go ahead, Angie.
Yeah, Dan, just really quick, since we do only have like 5 minutes, how about as a group, we, collectively agree, I'll type up the notes, and even from the groups of whomever captured the notes can send them to me so I can consolidate. And then why don't we plan on, right now, I don't remember off my mind, Dan, if we have a topic for August. Let's just continue this conversation, make that whole meeting like actually like a strategic planning. This is like the precursor to like an hour conversation of a breakout room. I know, I was like, I felt so bad. I'm like, I'm ending conversation.
Yeah, it was good.
I'll take the blame. I tried to get through a little bit too much at the beginning there. And that was even without introductions, but we also started 5 minutes late, but time flies when you're having fun, I guess, right?
Mm-hmm. So did anyone, and I apologize, because even with the breakout rooms, I was sharing this with my group. I've used them twice. And so I forgot that once I hit like going to breakout rooms, I have no time to let you know we're going to have this much amount of time, and can someone record the conversation or grab some notes? So if someone did from the different groups grab notes, I would really appreciate if you could send them to me. If not, I will just consolidate the gist of this whole meeting and then send it out and plan on in August, the next meeting, that we'll just spend the whole time discussing how to get this lifted off the ground.
Is there any quick hitters that anyone's excited to mention now, just while it's sort of fresh in mind?
I like it. I think it's gonna be a good thing. I do.
So some of the things we talked about was a resource fair. I'm involved in so many local resource fairs, but what are resources specifically for families in addiction that have addiction affecting them? And then to have a recovery action plan for your family. So it's not just the day and they're excited, but what are you going to do going forward, and kind of some resources that they could work on.
That's good. Is that Tom?
Tom. And then Vera talked about one time she shared her story about her addiction, a Vera in addiction and Vera out of addiction, and how the differences and how it still affects her and things like that. And then just to validate Dan and the video was so powerful. And the idea of having strangers come and talk to your family without your family member there, that is so freeing, because it is hard to talk about things with family because there's so much emotion tied to it, that this frees you to ask questions without that emotional baggage on there too. So that's group 6, I believe.
Good job, group 6.
I love that. And one thing that was brought up in our group is that family isn't always nuclear, who you grew up with, blood, things along those lines. So just breaking up and looking outside, not only for us in this room, but letting others know that family is however they define it, important support networks in their lives.
Awesome. Just reading Angelica's comment here. We talked about rebranding old family program that Chestnut used and why has worked from it. Okay. Oh, and use what worked from it. Yeah. I did the list I had did have a couple things from it. Some of it I think was maybe like they've been using the same stuff for 20 years, so it'd be good to just get sort of a fresh branding, I guess. But yeah, it's no need to reinvent the wheel, as they say. That's a good call. I actually had a good idea in ours, and it had to do with like literally meeting the client where they're at. But she talked about like having a caseworker or somebody checking in with family, like, if, with their consent, of course, actually like going to their home or, on a period, like weekly basis or something. And, just seeing how things are going, kind of re-educating, maybe doing the same with the clients, or if it's the same home, could maybe even just sort of think outside my head, have like mini sessions. And then, the question was, well, how would we fund that? And then Toy mentioned like maybe ROSC stipends, so like volunteers could do that kind of thing, somebody who's maybe certified recovery specialist or something like that. So I thought that was a good idea by her.
And Dan, I think Andrea had her hand up as well.
Okay, thank you.
I was in group 4 with Lakeisha at Bloomington Housing Authority. She had a couple good ideas. This is just really short and sweet here. But she was talking about possibility of like having more kids books at the library. So I thought of Bloomington Library right there. But having more folks, like just educating kids and helping them learn and process things and all of that. So then she had mentioned that Children's Home and Aid had some focus groups, a possibility of maybe them having one on recovery or something like that. So those were our 2 ideas that we had come up with. So
cool.
Excellent, thank you.
So it is 4:30. Couple quick announcements before we see you all next month. The Sober Living and Spirituality Work Group and now Recreation, we've been kind of combining forces and coming up with an idea for a picnic / fundraiser. It's been in some of our recent newsletters. Just want to say that Angi did get the date and park that we wanted. So we'll talk more about it going forward, but that's going to be on Saturday, September 25th at Anderson Park. More to come. If you can save the date, at least come out and have some fun and help us raise some money for people to get into sober living in our community. Angelica, do you mind just explaining the Grady's outing as well coming up?
And the 25th, that is the Worldwide Day of Play and the Day of the Dozers. So the 18th was when we wanted to do it.
Yeah, well, I didn't realize that was the case. I thought both those days were equally viable. We can take it offline, but
okay. Just to let you know.
Probably part of the reason I was partial to the 25th because I can't be there on the 18th, but
Well, we'll find another day.
yeah, we'll figure something out. And if it's the same day as that, you know, if people that are part of the ROSC come out, it should be fine. But I think the town's big enough to fit us both. Sorry, Angelica.
So we're having a sober recreation event on July 30th, and it's going to be at Grady's. So, of course, we would love if everyone could be completely sober. So please let clients know that this is available, and the ROSC will be funding this event, so no one has to pay unless they want foods or drinks or anything. So we're going to do mini golfing and all the other activities they have there. So we have a flyer. I'll ask Angie and Dan to send it out. So if you want to come, or if you have some friends or clients that you think would be interested, please pass it along. I'm asking people to RSVP by a certain time. So if you could give me a call or send me an email saying that you want to come, that'd be great. Thanks.
And I'll be there it's next Friday. And legit, like, bring your kids. I'm bringing my little, she'll be 8 next month, so I gotta remember. She's 7, my 7-year-old. So bring the kids. We want it to be a family fun activity, and really, and there's not gonna be like any scripture readings or any like stuff. It's just having fun out in the community, you know, without always focusing on addiction and recovery. So bring the family, tell a friend, and Angelica and I will both be there. So, you know, we'd love to see you. Vera, I'm looking right at you too. Linda, Randy. I understand if, you know, Randy.
What time is it?
A little bit.
6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 6 o'clock.
What time?
Angelica's at
Angie, what time?
1 second, 1 second.
Okay.
No, I got some right here. Sorry.
It's 6 o'clock.
6 o'clock at July 30th.
Yes, Dan's birthday.
Yeah, I would be there, but my family got me White Sox tickets as a surprise. So
Yeah.
20 games
Have a
over.
great afternoon. Sorry, I don't want to, you know, take too much of more of your time, but I'll see everyone next Friday.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Sorry we didn't have more time for discussion, but we'll continue it next time.